are live with the first ever Priestess Lesson. So excited to be sharing this with you. I used to do webinars, masterclasses, and then something inside, something from Spirit said, no, that's too patriarchal, that's too top down. And I claim my title as priestess. I am devoted to sacred feminine ways. And from my perspective as a coach and a teacher, that includes healing from the ways we've internalized shameful, toxic overculture, white supremacy, capitalism, patriarchy, all of these systems that would have us stay small and hide our light and bury our knowledge, just as goddess cultures were buried, just as indigenous ways of knowing and being were buried. And if there is any hope for humanity, I believe that we need to unearth this wisdom, reconnect to our bodies, reconnect to Mama Earth, and as women, really claim our intuitive knowing. And so that's what I do as a life coach, and I help people to do that. So today, though, we are going to talk about emergency CPR. It's a CPR lesson, but this isn't your typical CPR. This is community, pleasure, and rest we are talking about today, because I really believe that community, pleasure, and rest are 3 access points to healing from scarcity culture, shame culture, over culture. All of these are interchangeable. All the things that we're talking about today, like I said, white supremacy, patriarchy, colonialism, evangelicalism, American exceptionalism. And a really beautiful access point for me to heal from the ways I've brought these toxic cultural ways into my own body and into my own life has been through accessing community, pleasure, and rest. They are, in my opinion, the greatest threat to these toxic overcultures. And I see a real starvation, a real spiritual malnourishment happening in women, in non-men, that really, quite frankly, scares me. Sometimes it feels like I'm walking around with a bunch of zombies, and sometimes I feel like a zombie myself. I can feel really malnourished, but when I return to CPR, community, pleasure, and rest, I begin to feel more energized, more whole, more sovereign. And that's why I wanted to share them with you today. So this is a lesson, yeah, but it's also a little bit of a workshop. So I'm going to give you some exercises that you can do. We're going to do some visualizations together. We're going to be together for about 90 minutes. So get comfortable. And if you are here in the replay, we feel your presence, time travelers. Welcome, welcome. So just to kind of start out, I always like to be real. You know, I am a woman operating in capitalism, but I really believe in the gift economy and in reciprocity. So if you are here live or you're watching the replay, I invite you to make a donation if you get something out of this priestess lesson, and that you can do that at ellengilbert.com/donate. Thank you so much for weaving this community with me and helping sustain this work in the world. And then also, I'm so excited to announce that I have a free challenge coming up. It's been several months since I did one of these, and I've been teasing it for a little while now, but you can go ahead and sign up. I put the link in the Divine Feminine Village, and if you're watching on Instagram, it's in my bio. The free challenge is called Sovereign Empress. So everything that we're covering today is going to feed directly into the challenge. It's going to be expanded upon there. You're going to get daily worksheets and exercises, trainings, a whole community around this, as well as some meditations to listen to every day. So definitely sign up for Sovereign Empress. I'm really excited to flesh out what I mean by sovereignty, what I mean by Empress, and to take these three values, these sacred feminine values of community, pleasure, and rest, into a much larger embodiment of rising into your own sovereignty. As a woman living in the patriarchy, what does that look like? How do we heal from codependency? How do we heal from enmeshment and actually find our sense of individualized selfhood and still be able to sense belonging? And I think that's where the magic happens, is when we can hold on to our sovereignty and still feel like we belong to a community and not feel like our belonging is threatened by our sovereignty. So that's what that whole week is going to look like together. It's a free challenge. You can sign up, nothing to lose. You'll get daily emails and access to a lot more of my free coaching and all kinds of goodies. So go ahead and sign up for Sovereign Empress. That starts on August 8th. And if you've wanted to receive coaching from me for a while, but you felt nervous that you couldn't afford it, I'm going to be giving you $800 off my signature program, Become Your Own Soulmate, just for joining the challenge. So it's a really beautiful opportunity to receive support from me for a quarter of a year. All right, beautiful ones. Now that we got that out of the way, let's begin with an inquiry. And take a sip of my coffee. If you need to light a candle or burn some incense or put some oils on, grab a crystal, whatever makes you feel grounded, present, go ahead and do that now. Closing the eyes down. Taking some deep breaths to center here. Feeling the outline of your body. The support of Mama Earth supporting you below. That energy from below. Pushing and holding. Always there, always present. Drawing up some vital nutrients from Mama Earth. Maybe lifting and spreading the toes, wiggling them a few times. Drawing the breath in deeply from the bottom of the lungs. Setting a boundary around this time together. And inquiring, why did I show up today? Why am I listening and watching? Why am I here? What is it about community, pleasure, and rest that really speaks to my aching soul right now? Maybe there's a clear intention arising, maybe not. Maybe something you can't explain drew you here today. Thanking that part of yourself that is seeking out more nourishing ways of being in a society, in a culture, in a time when our attention is pulled in a million directions, when self-care has become a commodity. Silence and stillness feel more elusive than ever. You are choosing them, you are choosing yourself. Choosing presence. So much gratitude. Keeping the eyes closed down, I invite you to reflect on the ways that you have brought shame, scarcity, not enoughness into your being, into your field. Today, in this moment, maybe some beliefs you've been carrying around this morning, maybe this year, this season you're in of your life. How have you brought scarcity, shame, unworthiness into the story about who you are, the story about your life as a whole? Acknowledging with loving curiosity here, no judgment. When did this internalizing begin? Do you know? Can you feel those places where your body's cut off from your worthiness? Where in your body do you want to focus some love and awareness today, right now, to bring in some spaciousness, some ease? And can you feel some of that tension beginning to melt away just from the awareness, the acknowledging? This has been really hard to walk around with all of this shame and scarcity and unworthiness. Take another deep breath in, letting that worthiness and awareness spread throughout your entire body. Let it go. Beautiful one. Well done. We can open the eyes. So lovely. Yes, just acknowledging those ways we've brought this culture into our bodies and into our systems. Hopefully we can begin to separate from the belief that something's wrong with us because we have these limiting beliefs. We can begin to see how it really stretches back to before we were born. I'm reading a book called Discovering the Inner Mother. It's by Bethany Webster. It's about the mother wound, and highly recommend it. Talks about just the ways that patriarchy is, reproduced again and again through these mother-daughter relationships, and how, hopefully that can give you some compassion and see that you didn't create this system, right? This is not your fault. But you are here, so what part of it is your responsibility? Because remember, something can be not your fault and your responsibility. Beautiful. And remember, Sacred Feminine is about not only surviving in these systems, but how do we thrive? That's what we're taking it to. We're taking it to that next level. And community, pleasure, and rest, for me, really have been those top values that have helped me to thrive in my life as someone living under these systems. So we're going to start with a little exercise. I invite you to find a piece of paper and something to write with. And we are going to draw a circle just to begin. Big old circle. And we're going to divide the pie into 3 equal pieces. I think you know where this is going, but if you've ever received life coaching, you've probably done the wheel of life, which usually looks like a lot of different categories. But today we're just doing the wheel of CPR. So you can go ahead and write in each of the categories: community, pleasure, pleasure and rest. Ooh. Noticing in your body, like what's happening when you're writing these words, reflecting on them a little bit. Community, pleasure, and rest. Is there one that you have like a visceral reaction to? Is it positive? Is it negative? Are you excited? Are you scared? Just tapping into that a little bit. And with each of these 3 sections, we're going to further divide it into 3 sections. I'm going to get another color. And each of these sections gets 3 sections. So there's really 9 sections total. See? I promise this is gonna make a real impact. I'm not just making you do random shit. Okay, so within those sections, let's start with community. And we're gonna rate on a scale of 0 to 5 each of these areas. I'm gonna ask you to reflect on. So starting with community, with that very first piece, I want you to rate your sense of loneliness, with 0 being the most lonely and 5 being the least lonely. And that's like right now, in this moment, okay? Or maybe in this season of your life, however you want to do it. Starting with that very first. So just write a number in. It's always a good idea when a question is asked of you to close your eyes and notice the nervous system. All right, question 2. Rate your sense of belonging and meaning. Belonging and meaning. So meaning as part of a community, with 0 being the least and 5 being the most. Okay. So 5 would be like a totally full piece of this pizza. 0, there would be no toppings. Okay. Belonging and meaning and community. And finally, for this community piece, rate your level of satisfaction in your friendships, with 0 being the least and 5 being the most. Satisfaction in your friendships. 5 is like your sense of the best that life can be. Okay? Doesn't look like what anyone else has to say about it. So in your friendships currently. Beautiful. All right, moving on to pleasure. That first piece of the pleasure pie. Rate your sex life satisfaction, with 0 being the least and 5 being the most. Yep, we're talking about sex. Pleasure is not just sex, but it is a huge piece of the puzzle for all of us. And your sex life satisfaction could look extremely different from my sex life satisfaction and anyone else's sex life satisfaction. So go ahead and reflect on how satisfied you are with your sex life. It could be in a partnership and it could be on your own. All right, for that next piece, rate your level of beauty and sensuality satisfaction. So what do I mean by this? I think pleasure is anything sensual. We use all of our senses, right? So it could be a beautiful home that you've adorned exactly the way that you like. It could be, a sense of beautiful art that you've created or that you're consuming and enjoying. Any sort of satisfaction with those sensual things that aren't necessarily sexual. So eating delicious foods, smelling delicious smells, gazing at beautiful art, all of these things. How full is your tank right now? All right, and finally, rate your current level of satisfaction with being in your body. In your body. So pleasure is the experience of being in your body and experiencing the world from within that body. And of course, depending on our relationship to our bodies, this can greatly impact our pleasure. So go ahead and rate your current level of satisfaction with being in your body, with 5 being the most amazing relationship with your body that you can imagine. Beautiful. Okay, and now rest. So that first wedge of rest, we're going to ask ourselves, how satisfied am I with my sleep? My sleep could be number of hours of sleep, could be quality of sleep, sleep routines. How are you feeling about your sleep? And if you're starting to feel like really self-critical or like, what's the point of this? I just feel like shit about my community, pleasure, and rest, I promise we're going to get to the good stuff, and I'm going to help you take actionable steps to actually increase the level of satisfaction with all of these. Okay, so sleep. Ooh. All right, the next piece of rest, go ahead and rate, with 0 being the most checked out and numb and escapey, and 5 being the most mindful and embodied. How would you rate your restful, like your waking life, restful routines? And maybe you don't have any, so that would be 0. But what do you consider to be rest in your waking life? And on a scale of 0 to 5, how mindful and embodied are you when you are practicing rest? So like if you're just like doing drugs and drinking and watching TV, probably going to be lower on the 0 to 5 scale, right? But if you are really engaged and mindful and feeling your body and you're not trying to check out or escape all of the time, you're going to rate a little bit higher. We're going to talk more about what that means. But based on your gut reaction here. And finally, go ahead and rate your level of satisfaction from being versus doing. So 0 would be more of a doing energy that you sense throughout your life, and 5 would be more of a sense of being energy that you feel throughout your life, because rest invites us into being and not always doing. So in your whole general life, do you spend most of your energy, time, and space being or doing? 0 being doing, 5 being being. We're all somewhere probably in the middle, right? This is your satisfaction, no one else's. All right, go ahead and look at your numbers on your chart here. And I'm going to grab another color once again. And I'm just going to fill in my pie. And I am going to show you my numbers. So that's what it looks like right now. Some 2s and some 4s. 1, 3. And I'm actually going to color in with a line here where I see those numbers landing, with the outer edge, the full piece of the pie, being a 5, and that inner center being the lowest. So it kind of looks like that. See, this would be 5, this would be 0. And then I just made a little notch for a visual representation. And now I'm just gonna look at my wheel, and I invite you to do the same, and maybe you wanna total up the numbers for community, pleasure, and rest. So for community, noting your score, pleasure, rest. Wow. I am kind of surprised. I invite you to, just notice like what surprises you, what doesn't surprise you. why you showed up today, and like if that is reflected here on the pie. And then like what you want to focus on for the rest of this lesson moving forward. So I am going to be honest, I really thought that community would rank the lowest for me right now. It's been a lifelong ache that I've had. Like, I want to go live in a commune really badly. And I'm actively seeking intentional communities to be a part of wherever I end up next. So community I've always considered probably the lowest on this scale. However, I do have a very complicated relationship with pleasure, being raised evangelical in purity culture, and being bisexual but not coming out till I was 32, sort of speaking to those like sexual shadows. And then just being in my body as well has always been difficult. So I knew pleasure would be complicated. Rest, I did think would rate the highest. And it did. I rated a 9 in community, an 8 in pleasure, and a 10 in rest. And these are all out of 15, right? So, and these are things that I value and that I actively weave into my life. But yeah, community actually rated pretty highly, so that is interesting to me. So maybe you rated pretty lowly and you just want to kind of give yourself some compassion here and just notice this isn't about your inadequacy at all. This is about how the overculture has probably seeped into your lives through how you are able to access these 3 things. And maybe just reflecting on where you want to go from here, like which one matters most to you. What do you want to focus on today? And if you want to share in the comments, I would love to hear. I think that looking at this, I definitely want to focus on pleasure in this season of my life. Like, what could that look like? How could I access more of that? Really want to focus on being in my body, because I can really disassociate and have this experience from the outside in. And I really want to feel more from the inside out my life. So let's give some definitions here. And you can take notes. You can define these for yourself. I define community as the way we experience reciprocity through self-expression and fertile witnessing. So if you've attended one of my circles, virtually or in person, you know that we take time to share and then to witness. And it's a really important balance that we have to strike. So often as women, we've been socialized to be the emotional dumping ground for everyone in our lives, for all relationships. And culture really tells us that that is women's work, that emotional labor is our job. It comes naturally to us. We even enjoy it, but that's bullshit. So really having the guts to weave sacred community, in my mind, is stepping outside of that paradigm and actually asking to get our needs met, as well as helping to meet others' needs only in the amount that we have the capacity for that, and only to the extent that we give consent to do that. So it's really courageous and sovereign to step into healthy community. It's a tapestry that we weave together. It's interdependent instead of codependent, and everyone gets to ask for what they need and everyone gets to say no, which is so beautiful. It's a thick and rich tapestry as much as each contributing member decides to make it. So really you do get out what you put in. And if you are contributing to it only in the hope of getting something out of it, you might notice bitterness arise. This was my story for years in the church, right? Like, well, why would I show up for this? Because my needs weren't being met. And it's taken me a while to realize what those community needs are and to set lots of boundaries so that I'm meeting that need in a healthy way. We're just going to quickly define these, okay? So the next one would be pleasure, right? Pleasure, my definition, it is the portal through the body by which we meet our spirit It negates the lie that being in your body has to be difficult, painful, courageous, or work. Instead, giving us a framework for enjoying our lives, regardless of privilege, access, or ability. So it's really the middle finger to racism because in Sonia Renee Taylor's book, The Body is Not an Apology, she talks about body hierarchy and how, our society really prioritizes the experience of white, able bodied, cisgendered people. And so pleasure is super radical in that it says, we all get to feel pleasure. Pleasure might look different for all of us, but we all get to experience it simply because we are human and we are here. And that's really exciting. Okay, and then we have rest. So rest is the portal by which we integrate our lived experiences. It is a quiet, calm, nourishing space where it is safe to do nothing, be still, reflect, or receive. So it is the cure for internalized capitalism, which makes us feel like we're never enough because we could never do it all. So many of us say, I'll rest when I hit this deadline. That will be my reward. I'll rest on the weekend or during my vacation time. But the problem is we never hit those benchmarks and we never feel worthy because capitalism makes us believe that we are machines, not human beings. So rest reminds us of a vital human function that our ancestors knew and that nature knows and reflects to us all the time, which is if we don't regulate our nervous systems, we will recreate harm. So it's really important to remember, yes, we are divine, we are also human, and we do have limits. And it's a beautiful thing to honor those limits and replenish ourselves through all three of these: community, pleasure, and rest. Because overculture really would have us believe that we are not divine and we are not really human. Somehow we're both and we're neither, right? Like as women, to be that emotional dumping ground, we kind of believe we have to be superhuman and we have to do it all the emotional labor, all of the caregiving, all of the listening, and the being pretty and the fawning, right? But community, pleasure, and rest say that we actually can center our needs and our desires and our humanity. So these are truly the greatest threats to overculture because they require us to believe our worthiness and that we are worthy of these things just because we're here. That's our birthright. We're human. And we belong to the earth. We belong upon the earth. So nature is a beautiful mirror for how good it gets to look. And none of these things are dependent on our achievement, on what we can purchase. So that really threatens the systems that seek and stand to make money off of our belief in our unworthiness. Yeah, I hope this is resonating. I'd love to hear if it is, but this really has been, I feel like, revealed to me through my own devotional practice to sacred feminine and to these three values. Like, wow, these really are some amazing portals to my own worthiness, to healing from the ways that I am codependent upon these cultural harmful systems. But I'm always open to hear, like, what do you think are some others that could be something to reflect on for all of us? This is what I see my clients starving for the most, are community, pleasure, and rest. They all depend and feed on our limiting beliefs. So that really starts at the family level when we are children, and it is further enforced by the community levels. For me, that was school and church. Again, I was raised evangelical, so very patriarchal religion, authoritarian systems that really continue to keep me stuck in sort of that maiden energy that I talk about a lot, and we're going to talk about a lot in Sovereign Empress. Because they benefit on me staying small, staying a little girl forever, and not coming into my own, right? So we can really begin to see the ways that these systems have depended on our limiting beliefs. And that's how we internalize it, because we bring it inside the body, inside the nervous system, inside the field, inside our mind. And we can begin, luckily, to heal from this. We don't have to do it on our own, but it's a beautiful place to start your relationship to yourself. But I'm here to support you through that process. I support my clients through this process. And if you're interested in working together, I would love to hear from you. So the limiting beliefs that keep us separate from our community, our pleasure, and our rest, that are our birthrights, they look the same. All of these look the same. Ooh, we have a comment. Okay, Tyann says, love this. They weren't modeled for me at home and in my community. They are some of the hardest areas to believe I deserve and to practice giving myself. Thank you, dear one, for sharing. I love to hear from you. Yeah, absolutely. They're not modeled for us. That's so good. Yes, healthy community, healthy pleasure, healthy rest truly are not modeled for us. So we're like, how do we do it? Let's learn together. Let's figure it out together. Beautiful. So they share these limiting beliefs that say, well, one day when I'm a good enough girl and I have fulfilled my social expectations and my family expectations, and I've held enough space for enough people, and I've done enough emotional labor, or I've earned enough money, or I've hit enough goals and productivity in my job, then I'll be able to create the community of my dreams, or they'll just somehow come out of the woodwork and hold me. Or then I'll be able to prioritize pleasure, because that's really just for rich people. Or then I'll be able to rest because I will have earned it. This is all bullshit. This is all bullshit. So I want you to reflect, like, do you have a belief that maybe tomorrow's the day? It's always tomorrow when I'm going to start to like sit down and really work these things in my life. Or maybe it's 50 years down the road, retirement. Retirement is like this great goal for so many Americans. Like, then we'll get our RV and we'll go camping, and we will finally have time, for our partners, and we'll finally get to spend our time and our money the way we want to. You could die tomorrow. It just baffles me. I actually saw someone, so I went to Mexico a few weeks ago with my husband. We went to this beautiful resort in Puerto Vallarta, and we were just really embodied and really present with each other, with ourselves, and we were like, it's so sad how people wait to do things like this. And we spent like 10% of what most people there were spending to be there through our Hilton employee benefits, which is just to say there was like a different, I think, level of presence going on, maybe gratitude. I can't say for sure, but I did look around and I saw a lot of men, especially, on their laptops, on their phones, clearly working to be able, I can only assume, to afford for their families to be there. And they did not seem, there was one guy I really did observe. He was like yelling on the phone, like you could just tell his blood pressure was so high. Of course, I'm over here in the pool like a goddess, like enjoying, feeling so like pleasured out. And I'm annoyed that this guy is like ruining my zen. But I also just got curious, and I was like, what is the belief at play here? What is, what's happening in this family? There seemed to be a lot of alcohol flowing and no connection whatsoever on a meaningful level. And it just was really sad. And John and I really talked later about how it broke our hearts to see people working so hard to get this like vacation that they could post about on Instagram. And there was a lot of that going on, a lot of like influencers talking about the content they needed to create to sort of like afford being there. And I say all this to say capitalism really functions in this way. It wants us to work so hard to be able to have this unattainable vacation that's almost like this oasis in the desert of capitalism, or retirement oasis in the desert of capitalism. But what happens when you have worked so hard and changed so much and starved yourself of these birthrights, community, pleasure, and rest to get there? You get there and you are still imprisoned by these systems. You can't even enjoy what you've worked so hard for. And I'm not saying that's true for everyone. Obviously, I think hard work is important and sometimes it even pays off. But there's a particular tragedy to this American dream that never really gets fulfilled. And when we delay our pleasure, when we delay our rest, when we delay genuine connection and community, I just have to ask the question, like, what is it all for? What is it for? We are worthy of all of these things right now in this moment. And that's what Sacred Feminine is here to show us. It's a different way of being. And when you begin to live from that worthiness, you are more likely to access and to receive these gifts on a daily basis, on a moment-to-moment basis. So let's start with why these things fail. Community fails because people are afraid to ask for what they need. Absolutely. Women, we are afraid to ask for what we need. We're not allowed to have needs. If you relate to this, I'm going to refer you to Mara Glatzel, Glatzel. She has a podcast called The Needy Podcast. She's right. She just wrote a book. I haven't read it, but it's all about being a human with needs and how do we get these needs met, and how so many of our behaviors as adults are from our inner children who did not get their needs met. So normalize being needy, ask for what you need, and know that if the people around you say no to helping you meet that need, you can still meet that need. Absolutely. So that's the number one reason I see that community fails. People are too afraid to ask for what they need. And so my rule again is everyone gets to ask for what they need. So when I have a house guest, I share this with them. I'm like, please ask for what you need. I'm not going to read your mind. I'm not doing that emotional labor. And everyone gets to say no. And that is sovereignty that helps embolden us to actually ask, because we know that that person isn't going to feel like they have to say yes and they have to go beyond their capacity, beyond their boundaries to meet our needs. That's sovereignty. So know that when you ask, that person might say no, and it's not going to end your world, and it's not going to end their world because you asked for something. This is two-way sovereignty. Another reason I see community fail. People fail to set and hold their boundaries. So for all of these, we're going to talk about setting our intentions and setting our boundaries. But community especially, you can see on the individual relationship level, to a smaller group level, to a bigger group level, to a nationwide level, boundaries are so important, right? And there are 3 types of boundaries that I have taught on: energetic, emotional, and physical boundaries. Maybe physical boundaries are really obvious to you, not letting someone use your body for their own needs, but maybe the emotional and energetic are a little bit more dicey. And I am going to direct your attention to a self-love sermon I gave about a year ago called How to Set Sacred Boundaries. That is at ellengilbert.com/blog. You can search for that. I'm going to share the link in the Divine Feminine Village. It's a podcast you can listen to, but I do a deep dive onto these 3 types of boundaries, and it's really informative. So, moving on. Where did my notes go? Okay, so community fails because people fail to set and then hold the boundaries. Glennon Doyle says, setting the boundary is not the hardest part. Holding the line is the hardest part. And I see this time and time again where people do a great job, finally setting that boundary and asking for what they need. But then the moment there's pushback, they roll over. So that's where the work really is. Okay, why else does community fail? It fails because we try to save each other. We try to fix each other. We don't know how to hold space. We don't know how to witness. We don't know how to hold the uncomfortable silence. So this was a huge reason I started my moon circle. I've started 2 now, and I hope to continue to circle with women in this way for the rest of my life. Because what we do, what is integral and central to this, is the lineage of Jean Shinoda Bolen's book, The Millionth Circle. She is the one that taught me fertile listening. And then Becca Piastrelli, my mentor, really helped me in her podcast, Belonging, to see just the value, the feminine value of fertile witnessing and how to sit in the uncomfortable when people are pouring their heart out to you or saying that they're suffering from something or there's some problem in their life. And instead of jumping into action, into advice mode, into fix it mode, because we're uncomfortable, actually holding that space. And maybe if you say anything, just say like, thank you for sharing that with me. That sounds really hard. And then noticing when you receive fertile witnessing, which is so rare, when you receive it, how good it feels. How good it feels for someone to actually listen and have eye contact and just hold the space. And how when we do this for each other, we don't save each other, we allow each other to save ourselves. And that is sustainable. That is the only model that works long term. So please find a circle, join a circle, start a circle where they practice fertile listening. Moon circles are beautiful places to start. Any sort of women's circle, or probably any circle, but maybe reach out to the organizer and just ask, like, what does the sharing look like here? Could we try this? And then if you want to start your own, reach out to me, because I did create a free webinar on how to start a moon circle, which you can again find at my blog. I think it's ellengilbert.com/blog/moon-circle. Yes. Okay. Beautiful. So, community. Those are the reasons that these things fail from my perspective. What do you think? Why have community efforts failed in your life? I would love to hear. So these are the limiting beliefs I really see with community. Again, I have to fit in and change who I am in order to belong. Number 1. We do not want to fit in. We want to belong. Fitting in and belonging are not the same thing. So my book recommendation for this, if community was where you really wanted to focus today, please immediately read Belonging by Tokopa Turner. Belonging. One of, if not my favorite book of all time. It's poetry. It's absolute poetry. And she talks about the difference between fitting in and belonging, and how we have to belong to ourselves in order to belong to each other, and how so often we use community or friendships or romantic relationships or family or work relationships or any kind of community as a way to bypass belonging to ourselves, as a way to meet those needs that we didn't get met in childhood. So we really use each other to project, of course, the ways we long to belong to ourselves. And once you start nurturing that relationship to yourself, it will be so much easier to set boundaries against the people who would feed off of your good nature and actually attract people who want to be in a healthy reciprocal relationship with you. And that's what my program Become Your Own Soulmate is all about. If you want to get $800 off, sign up for my challenge, Sovereign Empress. DM me, whatever you got to do to find that landing page. Sign up. It starts August 8th. It's a free 5-day challenge. It's going to be so much fun, and you're going to get $800 off my signature coaching container where we're going to talk all about how to belong to yourself. Beautiful. So that's limiting belief number 1 for community. Another one I see a lot of the time is people using being an introvert as an excuse. Being an introvert is beautiful, and I know that people are introverts. I have an introverted side that I really started to learn about during the pandemic. I was like, oh, this is nice. I like having space to process and reflect and recharge my batteries, even though I am a pretty extreme extrovert at heart. I have definitely come to see such beauty and benefit in being alone. But where this becomes a limiting belief is when people say, well, community is great for other people, but I don't really need close relationships. The number one, I read this study, I can't cite it or remember exactly what it said, so don't take my word for it, but it said something to the extent of the greatest marker of satisfaction in a human's life is the number and quality of close relationships. That is like so important to us. Because we evolved to be in these small communities of like 20, 30, 40 people where everyone had a clear role and could feel a sense of meaning and connection. That's when human beings really just like their brain development shot through the roof, was when we started to really gather in these larger groups around campfires, telling stories, sharing food, sharing practices, and developing a sense of culture and society. So we evolved. We are pack animals. Okay, our survival depends on it. And we are living in the age of loneliness. We are living in an epidemic where we're more connected than ever through technology, but we feel more isolated than ever at the same time. So really weaving community is like such a value that I have. And it feels really scary and big and heavy and hard because I can't do community on my own. I can do pleasure on my own. I can do rest on my own, but I can't do community on my own. And yeah, it's something I think I'll always be in search of. And I've done a lot of writing on it, a lot of podcasts on it. You can find those on my website. But anyway, I'm living into this question. And then another limiting belief that I see with community is I've been burned too many times by community. I'm not falling for that again. And often I talk about this as the sisterhood wound. Being burned, I mean, literally that term, you can think about the burning times when women were burned at the stake and killed in other ways for being powerful women, for being magical women, for having the knowledge of birth and death and plant medicine and magic, and stepping outside those lines of patriarchal religion and all of these things. Women would literally turn each other in, give each other up in order to avoid death, in order to survive. And again, my mentor Becca Piostrelli talks a lot about this, but that created not only a witch wound within us that keeps us afraid of our spiritual magic, but also created a sisterhood wound within us where, so many women say, I just can't be friends with women, and there's a real sense of competition for the resource of men, for the resource of the male gaze, for the resource of jobs, because there is a gender pay gap, and a lot of places only have so many seats at the table for women. So all of these systems, of course, create competition among women. And so maybe you've used that excuse with friendships, or, you can think about friendships that created a lot of pain for you. Maybe you've had your heart broken in friendship. That's something we don't talk about enough. So another book recommendation would be Big Friendship, which talks about how we as a culture need to value friendship as much, if not more, than we value romantic partnership, and just how that would shift things. It's so good. Okay, I've talked a lot about community. I'm not going to have much time for pleasure or rest. Maybe I'll go longer, or maybe I'll do a part 2. But let's move on to pleasure. So why does pleasure fail? Pleasure fails us because we are ashamed to claim it. We have to be audacious enough to access our pleasure. We have to say we're worthy of it in order to receive it. Pleasure really does happen in the mind. Like, our mindset can create so many blocks to pleasure. All the messages we receive from society, again, as women, say we are unworthy. We have to fix our bodies, our face, our hair, our nails. Our house has to be Insta perfect. Our relationship has to meet #couple goals, before we are worthy of pleasure. And even then, if we are worthy, we are deemed worthy to receive it, the expectation is that our pleasure only exists for the pleasure of others. That's male gaze. That is harmful and pervasive as hell, right? That's one of the reasons pleasure fails. Another reason pleasure fails us is because we are too afraid to confront our own shadows. But let me tell you, if we don't illuminate our shadows, we attract experiences that will illuminate them for us, and probably in ways that we don't really want to experience again and again and again. Gabby Bernstein calls these universal assignments, because just when you thought you got that whack-a-mole beat down, here it comes popping up in another area of your life. That's shadow work, my friends. Never over as long as we're alive, but we can just open to the journey and hopefully confront our shadows openly, bring them to the light on our own. And that can definitely shift our experience with them. And you can see in America, especially, God love everyone here, just the ways that sexual shadows have really dominated and fucked up our society. I mean, this is why women, experience so much gender-based violence. This is why trans people, LGBTQI people as a whole experience so much violence, sexual violence. It's because of these sexual shadows that our culture holds on to. And which is why the Me Too movement was such a huge deal. We were really dragging those shadows to light. And I mean, what just happened with Roe being overturned by the Supreme Court, like a bunch of men trying to regulate a bunch of women's bodies, or people who have uteruses bodies. Clearly sexual shadows are at play here, y'all. Clearly another way to dominate and control, right? I mean, it's obvious. And it's pitiful, and it's pathetic, and it's horrible. So we can see the extent of these one person's sexual shadows that they won't bring to light, and how it can create this whole ripple effect of cultural shadows and societal shadows. So we need to confront our shadows. Another reason pleasure fails us is because we don't prioritize it. And this is really my issue with pleasure, I would say. One of my big issues is, even for all the shame work I've done, for all the shadow work I've done, I came out as bi this year, which was so exciting. Even so, not prioritizing my daily pleasure, my moment to moment experience of pleasure, because I didn't see it modeled for me, and I don't really know how to integrate it into my life. This is why I created the January of Pleasure challenge we did a couple years ago, which was so wonderful, and I want to bring back in the dead of winter 30 days of a pleasure practice. Pretty spicy, pretty wonderful, to heal this part of ourselves. So what would it look like to prioritize pleasure for you? And how can you bring more pleasure into your life? The limiting beliefs we have around pleasure is that it has to be used as a reward. It has to be earned, again, like that dude on vacation. Or it can only be used as a form of procrastination. So if you did it but you weren't done with the work, or you hadn't hit that goal, then you shame yourself and say, oh, I was just procrastinating, instead of giving it a valid place in your life, a seat at the table, bringing it out of the shadows again. And number 3, the limiting belief I see is this idea that pleasure has to come from outside of ourselves, that pleasure must be expensive. It requires us to purchase products or experiences, that it must include another person. These are all limits. You can access pleasure right here, right now, in your body. You don't have to buy a thing. You don't need anyone else. So beautiful, right? All right, let's move on to rest, and then we're going to talk about setting intentions and setting boundaries for CPR. So why does rest fail us? Why is rest something that you're struggling to bring into your life? Rest fails us because we live under an oppressive scarcity culture that would have us believe we are machines instead of human beings. Number 1. Yeah? Rest fails us because we are so brainwashed to think we must compete in regards to our energetic productivity and output in order to get our voice, message, and legacy out there. So, our legacy is important. Our work in the world is important. It creates a sense of meaning. It helps us understand our purpose. It helps us live into our passion, change the world, make it a better place. Our work is very important. But what capitalism does is it takes our work in the world and it says it has to look like this. We have to carve it down to fit into this system. And when we begin competing with each other in this way, when we begin thinking, oh, well, I'm a coach, but I'm not having 6-figure months, for example, it's like, oh, I guess I should just give up. I guess my work doesn't matter. Or I guess I have to hustle my buns off. And as Brene Brown would say, hustle for my worthiness, because part of you feels like if you could just work another hour, another 2 hours a day or a week, that you would somehow get to that level. But the truth is we never get to that level because they keep moving the bar. They keep raising the bar. And so as long as we keep raising our own bar and never hitting whatever that thing is to feel worthy, then we're never going to rest, because, we haven't yet seen that we deserve it, because culture hasn't told us that we were enough. So another reason rest fails, we are numbing, we are escaping, and we are calling that rest. And that's not nourishing. That's not nurturing us. I'm not saying it's bad to veg out and to sometimes do what it takes to turn your brain off, which I hear a lot of people say. But I want us to be aware of when we're doing it and some new ways that we can actually nurture ourselves. So the limiting beliefs that we bring into our experience around rest include, only when I've earned it can I rest, right? So whether it's earning it morally, financially, when we've checked enough boxes, when we've crossed enough things off our list, then we'll rest. The whole like retirement vacation paradigm. Number 2, I can't afford to rest. That's for rich people. And of course, privilege plays a huge part into this, into rest and pleasure. And yet they are for everyone. They are for us all. They are our birthright. And there's a lot of dismantling we have to do of the reasons we believe that we can't access it. Rest is for everyone. Number 3, the limiting belief around rest. Life is just hard, it's a hustle, and there's no rest for the weary. I hear this one all the time. Like, life is hard and then you die. You'll sleep when you're dead. I've heard that. Wow. You know, it's bullshit. And maybe you got that message in childhood. Maybe you got that message in school or in your career. It really is up to you to start to dismantle that bullshit. So we've gone through sort of why these things fail in our culture, what the limiting beliefs are, but how do we really solve the problem? For all of these, the thing that unites them, in my experience, is that when we set intentions and we set boundaries, we can actually make it happen. And that might sound really simplistic, and it is meant to. I want you to feel really empowered to begin to make changes to bring more community pleasure and rest into your life. Oh, I'm talking a lot here. I'm on fire. And so it sounds simple, but I'm going to show you how they're all connected. So that means the solution is connected too. And maybe, again, you want to focus on the one that came through during the exercise in the beginning. All right, so setting intentions. I invite you to go ahead and close the eyes down again, taking a few deep breaths here to access the body's wisdom, the earth's wisdom again, your 2 resources and gateways into sacred feminine at any given moment. And bringing the one to mind you want to focus on, community, pleasure, or rest. Go ahead and pick one if you can. I'm picking pleasure. They're all equally worthy. And I invite you to visualize you at your maximum satisfaction, fulfillment in this area. What do you see? Getting curious. How do you seem? Like, what is your energy like? What are you doing? What's the expression on your face? What is in the scene with you? Like, how are you dressed? What's the environment like? Are there others there? Really open to the vision. This is like best case scenario. This isn't pressure to make something perfect. Could be metaphorical, archetypal, symbolic. Notice what fear is coming up for you as you are in the vision, seeing yourself at your maximum rest, pleasure, or community. Maybe it's some of the limiting beliefs we spoke to before, or something more personal and unique to you and your situation. I'm never going to get there because why? And now I want you to notice what's exciting to you about the vision. What gives you some hope? What seems really doable about this vision? And finally, like, what questions do you have for the vision, for your own intuition? I'm just going to give it a moment to see what answers might naturally arise. Whenever you're ready, you can come out of the visualization and grab your journal and just take some notes here. Maybe the questions that you want to reflect on later in meditation. And if you would like to share what you saw in the chat, I would love to hear. I saw myself like wearing red, like a red dress, and because pleasure was my focus, and like buying myself flowers every week and just like dancing around my house and having parties. I really miss having like dinner parties. And everyone had those like beautiful crystal old-fashioned champagne glasses, and I was just like filling them up, like dancing around with like a bottle of champagne, like filling up everyone's glass. And it was just so beautiful. That really is like the missing piece for me right now, I think. It's that pleasure and community, I guess, intersection a little bit that I'm really longing for. So, yeah, your visions are sacred and divine. They come from the goddess or ancestor or spirit or whatever works for you, but I do believe they are divine. They can give us so much clarity. And anytime you want to bring more of these values into your life, I invite you to go into this visualization and then use your journal. But what would your best community, pleasure, or rest life look like? That's how you find out in those visions. And then using your journal, using coaching, using a circle format, whatever works for you, whatever container is best for you, take just a teaspoon of that vision and make a plan for it. You don't have to meet the vision today of what you saw. You know, these oppressive systems also make us believe that if we can't get the perfect 100% level, that it's not even worth striving for the 1% or the 10% or the 50%. And again, that's bullshit. It's bullshit. We get to take teaspoon amounts as we begin to heal from codependence, as we begin to embrace and rise into our sovereignty, as we begin to move toward the direction of our alignment with our soul's purpose. and our human expression our birthright. So what would that teaspoon-sized dose of your vision look like today or this week? And can you set a SMART goal around it? SMART goals, we use these in coaching a lot as well. Are they, what's the S? Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So, for example, I saw myself dancing around in a red dress, pouring champagne into everyone's champagne glass, buying myself flowers. A couple things I can do right away. I can buy myself flowers. I can wear red more. And I can start to make plans to have this dinner party. And even then the fear comes up, oh, when am I going to have a dinner party? I don't have any time. I work most nights. I can find the time. I can make it happen. I can plan it several months in the future. Or maybe if the dinner party is unattainable, I could have dinner with a friend or a couple of friends. Or maybe what I'm really craving is the experience of cooking and hosting, because I haven't done that in a while, and like using the fine china and getting dressed up in my house. I could do that with like 1 or 2 people. It doesn't have to be that 100%. I would love to hear what you saw and what your vision is and what your 1 teaspoon amount is. Tyan, I'm so sorry. I'm just seeing your question. Kids are where rest fails me. Can you speak to this? I'm sorry, dear one. Well, I will be honest. I do not have kids. And I know that that separates me from the experience of bringing these values into an embodied way of being with little ones, depending on you for their needs. Because that's a very real thing when you are a mother. Absolutely. And for rest especially, I know. So many mothers I know are getting little to no sleep, and it makes everything more difficult, right? Everything. Like sleep deprivation is a form of torture. And I can only speak to that because of what women have told me. It hasn't been my direct experience. And that's the beauty of Circle. We need each other. So I need you all to tell me, how have you been able to take those teaspoon amounts of rest and having little ones? Little ones with big needs. Yes, boundaries. Absolutely. Asking for what you need from your community. Absolutely. And probably a lot of self-compassion and a lot of remembering that this is a season. I was just about to respond with a goal of 1 time a week for myself. 1 time for just you. Yeah, that's beautiful. Absolutely. I love that. It is possible. That 1 teaspoon amount, it's attainable. It's possible. We might have to adjust our expectations. We might not hit it every week or every day or whatever the time-bound piece is. But are we willing to have the courage to set a goal, see it fail, see it change, see our expectations adjust? Are we willing to be in the messiness of our lives and to remember the worthiness that these are our birthrights, to remember their divinity, to remember to worship our human experience and allow for our longings and our achings? So much goal setting anxiety that I see with my clients comes from a real fear of getting it wrong, a real fear of having hope, of having a vision and being disappointed. And I have that too. I have that every day with myself. Like, what's the point? I'm just going to fail, or it's not going to look like what I wanted it to look like. So why even try? And that really is the medicine of the teaspoon sized dose. I'll give an example of one of the reasons I think I rated pleasure so highly in some of these areas. There's a couple fours here. I think that the question about beauty and like the sensual satisfaction, I have been on a journey of cooking more and more and actually sharing food with my community pretty regularly, almost weekly. I'm sharing food or something with someone that I made myself, and I am cooking 3 times a week now, like some beautiful recipe, and that I really want, like that my body's craving. And I really enjoy cooking. It doesn't have to be cooking, but that was something that I felt was so unattainable for so long, because I felt like if I wasn't meal planning every single meal for the week, and if I wasn't, meal prepping every Sunday, that I was a failure. And if I had to order out, or if I had to, eat a frozen pizza or like whatever, that it just like it wasn't good enough. And so the teaspoon analogy for that has really been, well, what if I just set a goal to, at first I think it was cook once a week, just once a week, and make enough that I could eat on it throughout the week a few times. And then I really wanted to mix it up, so I moved to 2 times a week, and now it's 3 times a week. And I feel really good at 3 times a week. I don't know if it'll change or grow, but just by taking those small incremental steps, I was able to get to a point where I feel like I'm eating, like the best food I am eating these days is the food that I make for myself. And some of the best community ties that I've woven recently have been the ties of sharing the food that I've made with people that I love. And it gives me a sense of meaning. It gives me a sense of that pleasure of actually the cooking process. Like I listen to an audiobook or some music. Sometimes I drink a little wine, and I really enjoy cooking. And then I also get to enjoy the practice of eating what I cooked and thinking it's the best food ever and feeling really proud of myself. So something so small can end up having ripple effects on these areas of life. So do not doubt the teaspoon-sized vision. All right, beautiful ones. That's setting intentions. And then with our last 5 minutes, we're going to talk about setting boundaries. Because I really believe it's between these two that everything flows. It's the tension we live in, right? Like we have the vision, but then how do we protect it and actually get it? And that's where boundaries come into play. So there are obvious boundaries with community we've spoken to, especially with energetic and emotional boundaries with your community. Again, that sermon I gave on setting sacred boundaries, I highly recommend listening to that podcast episode where I talk about why it's so important to get consent before we share really emotionally heavy things with our community, why we don't ever want to assume consent, and how to really tell someone in a loving way, I don't have capacity for this. Everyone gets to ask for what they need, and everyone gets to say no. Community boundaries are pretty clear because they are with people. But pleasure and rest boundaries can be different because it's with things in our life or contexts in our life or with ourselves. We have to really set up our own accountability for those types of boundaries. But luckily, pleasure and rest, they're pretty linked, I would say. And the boundaries that tend to come up, let me scroll back here. that we need. We need to always ensure with our pleasure and our rest that we're not just numbing out, escaping, right? I've spoken to this a few times already in this lesson, but that we are actually bringing in nourishment. Nourishment. Like what actually nourishes you on a soul level when it comes to your rest and your pleasure? What isn't just like checking a box, like, oh, I slept 8 hours. But how was your sleep quality? How was your wind down? How easeful was your waking up? What did you dream? You know, how do you feel after a sleep like that? The quality over the quantity, or at least quality and quantity for sleep and for pleasure, right? I see so many couples just saying, oh, well, we had sex 2 or 3 times last week, so clearly our relationship is in great shape and we're doing great. But like, how present were you for the sex? How connected were you? Did it really nourish you on a soul level? And that's why I love Tantra, because it's not about the goal of orgasm. It's like, how available were you for this connection and for this experience? How in your body were you? Were you checked out mentally? Quantity is not the measure here. Quality is the measure for all of these things. And it really requires intention and presence and being awake for our fucking lives. So do whatever you need to do to get energy into your body. Rest might not always be the thing. Rest might not always be possible. Rest, if you are depressed, can actually make you more depressed. Maybe what nourishes your energy in those moments is actually moving your body, actually opening the system and allowing Kundalini to engage and to heal and to activate your nervous system in a healthy way so that you're more engaged and more present and more alive for your life. Beautiful. So we really want to be aware of our intentionality, our presence. And I think those are the big boundaries for me with rest and pleasure. Definitely setting boundaries with work. So important. So important. Especially if you're a business owner, like you feel like you can never do enough. There's always something more you could be doing to, make more money, get more clients, get more leads. Again, they just keep raising the bar. And I made a goal when I became an entrepreneur not to burn out, but to really meet my needs first, because I don't see how someone can call themselves a self-love coach and preach this message, but work 80, 100, whatever hours a week, just go. I can't fathom it. It doesn't feel aligned. It doesn't feel authentic. So that's always been a priority for me in my business. If you're a business owner, I would love to talk to you about that. It's just such an interesting topic, and I have supported many business owners as a coach. So again, get inside Sovereign Empress. August 8th, our free challenge kicks off. Okay, those are the big boundaries. Work. Oh, and then technology. I've talked a lot about this again in my sermons on my blog, and you can go to ellengilbert.com/blog and search for tech boundaries. I think I'll share this link in the Divine Feminine Village. It's called Break Up With Your Tech, and there's a little worksheet you can do in there. But basically, we have so many competing things on our attention these days, as I was saying in the beginning, and technology might make us feel more connected, but it actually isolates us. So getting your phone out of your eye line, I know it's ironic, I'm talking to some of you probably through your phone. Getting your phone out of your eye line as much as possible, hiding it from yourself, putting it in the drawer, putting it in the cabinet, in the closet, putting it away, getting it out of the bedroom, setting those app limits, screen time limits for yourself, and really only engaging with technology and with the news. That would be another one. in a way that feels nourishing and devotional and safe for your nervous system. And again, I'm always here to talk more about these things. These are just the things I notice when I have these boundaries in place. I feel very sovereign. I feel very aligned, and I feel like I'm living into better versions of my maximum community, my maximum pleasure, my maximum rest. So boundaries aren't just with other people. They're also with these things that suck your energy, drain your energy in your life. Beautiful ones. Okay, we are at time. I could keep going. Thank you so much for being with me, for listening or watching the replay, for going on this journey. I never know where we're going to go exactly, but I do feel led to talk more about CPR and how it can really bring our patriarchalized bodies back to life. If you take nothing else from this, just remember it's not your fault. You live in these oppressive systems, in these oppressive times. But maybe acknowledge the ways you've brought it into your own life, and that you continue to replicate these oppressive systems in your mental landscape, in your physical landscape, in your spiritual landscape, and really commit to changing the tide from here on out and having a lot of compassion and a lot of grace for yourself, but also taking those steps to be more intentional, to live from these values of community, pleasure, and rest, because they are your birthrights. They will nourish you. You are worthy, plain and simple. It's not to meet someone else's needs or expand your capacity to hold more for others. No, that's not what we're doing this for. We're doing this because you are worthy. Period. So I love you so much, and I'm here if you have any questions. Again, if you got something out of this, I would love it if you would make a donation, ellengilbert.com/donate. If you already make donations from some of the free things that I have given, thank you, thank you, thank you for keeping this community alive. Please sign up for Sovereign Empress, my free 5-day challenge starting August 8th. You will get $800 off of my signature coaching program, Become Your Own Soulmate. If you like what I have to say, if you have a feeling and a hunch that I would be a great coach for you, I would love to chat with you and see you inside that challenge. All right, dear ones, have a beautiful, sovereign, sacred day. Love you so much. Bye.